Hello, this is White Wolf here at Element Mountain in Vermont, and I'm making a really short video here on the kayak of the water lily, which is floating away from me there. Now, right here, what I'm going to be addressing is the tuberous water lily versus the fragrant water lily. And the difference is that when we get to looking at the leaves, right, these perfect round lily pad leaves with a cleft. See that cleft right there? We're talking about the tuberous water lily. Each leaf is perfectly round, and each leaf has a cleft in the one side. The cleft that you see in the round leaves of the tuberous water lily is where the stem comes out underneath the water. So you see the cleft there, and underneath you see the stems that are coming out long and trailing all the way down to the floor beneath the water surface. And you can see that the water lily grows in mats. It's definitely a colonizing plant. Likes to live in colonies on the water surface, growing out of the really soft mud of pond floors. Now, the nice thing about the water lilies is they, especially the tuberous water lily, is they grow in a wide variety of areas across the country. Now, if you're in an area where you've got ponds, still quiet water, chances are you're going to find water lily growing somewhere. Especially since they can be found, into southern Canada on the east side, all the way down to Arkansas. You can find them clear on out to Nebraska. Minnesota, so it's a really, really large range. And in the early season, before all the greens on these ponds really stir up, if you look underneath the water, you'll see little leaves curled up, kind of like cigars. And typically, these are your water lily leaves that are starting to grow and starting to form under the water before they actually come to the surface and open up into these circles. And all of these water lilies end up blooming. Now, depending on where you are, what your location is, you can find these lilies blooming, usually starting in June and then moving all the way until the early autumn. So you can find them blooming all the way into September in a lot of areas. Now, here you see a bloom that is not yet opened. You'll see how it has a green casing around the petals. Usually 4 green casings surrounding the soft white petals that are all closed up there. When they open, of course, they turn into this beautiful, showy, picturesque flower floating on the water surface. Now, you notice it does not have a leaf under it. It simply has a long stem that goes down and connects it to the root. Same with the leaves that can be found growing around it, as you can see here. But the flower sits alone. It does not come off the leaf. It has its own singular stem that it grows off of. Now here you can see a flower bud. It hasn't even begun to open yet. Notice it sticks up on a singular stem. And beside it you have another one that's just starting to break open and show the white flower petals inside. And then we have the next stage. You can see it just starts to open. One side at a time. The nice thing about such a showy water here on the water, sorry about that, tongue-tied. The nice thing about seeing and viewing such a large showy flower here on the calm water is that you're not going to confuse it with another flower that looks similar. These water lilies certainly stand out on the ponds and calm water areas. The nice thing about water lily, besides just their absolute beauty and their food for insects, which you can see, this one here is filled with insects feeding on the pollen inside, is the food source they have to human beings as well. There's actually quite a few sources of food on this little flowering plant. When they're first growing in the spring, and like I was talking about, you find the leaves and they're still curled up. You can actually take those leaves that are still curled before they unfurl, and you can do the same thing with the leaves, the curled up leaves, as you can with the flower buds that we looked at here earlier that are not yet opened, just the buds, not the open flowers. You can boil those for about 7 minutes. And after you boil the leaves and the flowers, the flower buds and the curled leaves before they open, you can eat them. You can eat as many as you want to. Perfectly healthy for you. Quite delicious. I like them anyway. I know everybody has their own taste, but to me, the water lily leaves and flower buds have a really, really unique and delicious flavor. Now in the autumn, all these flowers go to seed. And when you find the seeds, you can harvest them. And when you harvest them, you can dry them out, you can roast them, you can pound them in the flour, and you can eat them after you cook them or dry them, or pound them in the flour and add them to other flours for bread cakes and things like that. They have a really, really high quality oil. They also contain protein, which again, a good protein source found in plants is most commonly found in the seeds, not all the time. And in areas like this where you have a lot of them growing, it's easy to gather quite a few of the seeds, which makes them a really good source of starch. So it's a very filling addition to your wild edibles diet. Now if we pull up some of the roots, very easy to pull up. We pull up, they're just shallowly dug in really loose soil, mud underneath. You can see that they've got these brown sheaths on. Now, of course, the fragrant water lily has got, and we've got a mixture here of tubers like this, and the tuberous water lily has more like small potatoes, brown potatoes. And the the rootstock that you see here. Right underneath all the small stems that are coming out to supply the leaves and flowers, but the rootstock itself here can be peeled and boiled and eaten just like potatoes. Again, very starchy, very filling, very nutritious. Similar to the cattail rootstocks, burdock rootstocks, things of that sort. Of course, they have their own flavor. And in an area where there's plenty growing, you can easily harvest a decent amount of rootstocks. And again, even if you just take a little piece like this off of a chunk like this and forage around, you'll get a decent amount of very filling food, very nutritious food. But let's say you took this chunk here and you just had this little piece broken off. If you bury this back down in the mud, it will grow again next year. Right? They are very prolific, which is why, of course, you see them growing in great mats on the waters. Now, if you're collecting the roots of the tuberous water lily and the little brown potatoes, again, you can eat as many as you want. But when you're eating the roots of the fragrant water lily, you don't want to eat too many of those. All right, in large quantities, they can actually be toxic. All right, so again, if they look like a potato, eat as many as you want. If they look more like a long tuber, you know, eat very sparingly. The water lilies of the fragrant variety with the tubers, they're actually more medicinal than they are edible when it comes to the tubers. I mean, they have been used, the roots have been used in tea for a long time in treating of coughs and mouth sores, to stop bleeding. They've also been poulticed, you know, and put on swellings and inflammations. You know, there's quite a few uses, but I'm not going to get into too many because you have to be careful with the fragrant water lily. It can be toxic. People can be more sensitive to it than others. So again, check the roots, and if it is the tuberous water lily, have at it. But if it's a fragrant water lily, use caution. Now here's a better picture of the fragrant water lily's root. So you can see we've got the flower bud here, and we have a flower that's just starting to open. Alright, so remember, these flower buds are edible if you boil them for about 7 minutes. And here you can see a leaf of the fragrant water lily that is still curled up. It's a new leaf coming out. Alright, this leaf can also be boiled for about 7 minutes with those flower buds and eaten. You don't want to eat them raw though. Right, make sure to boil them first. But if you follow those long tendrils down, see here you have an open leaf. See how it's purplish underneath? The purplish underneath is another way you can identify the fragrant water lily, which has the purple underneath, versus the tuberous water lily, which has pretty much green underneath and top. So fragrant water lily, purple and green on top. Tuberous water lily, green on top, green on bottom. And you come all the way back and you've got this beautiful rootstock here that you can see where everything comes out of. Right, this is what was used medicinally for thousands of years. Teas for coughs. It was even used in trying to treat tuberculosis for a long time. But you can also poultice it on wounds and bruises as well. But again, just be careful with it. Push that back down into the mud. That plant will be just fine. Continue to grow. One more quick point here. You know, you get a lot of these water lilies, they all kind of grow together in these pond areas, wetland areas, marsh areas. So if you see this leaf right here, again, kind of a round leaf with the cleft in it at the end, green on top, purple on bottom, with this reddish stem going down into the mud, this is your fragrant water lily. And again, if this is green on top and green on bottom, it is going to be your tuberous water lily. However, you look to the side here and you've got these more elongated leaves that has a cleft in them. And you'll notice that the stems of the water lilies, fragrant, and the tuberous are round, right? But on these other leaves here, the stems are more like rhubarb. Right? They're wide and they have a U shape to them. So they're round on the bottom side, and on the top side they have a U hollowed out into them. This leaf here and stem belongs to none other than Spatterdock, or the water lily, the yellow water lily that you see right here. That flower is not completely open yet, but if we move over to here, we've got one that is open. That's your Spatterdock, your yellow water lily, and those are the flowers that belong to these leaves that can typically be found growing side by side with the fragrant or tuberous water lilies. And also keep in mind that they unfurl very similar. If you look down in there, the leaves, right, you'll see a leaf. There's a floating snail. Where'd that leaf go? There it is. It's kind of dim under the water there, but you can see that it's furled up, just like the furled up leaf of the fragrant water lily I showed you before. So again, pay attention when you're harvesting these. And again, if you look at the stem of this one, and I'm not going to pull, well, I can, there's so many of these here. Here's the new leaf of the Spatterdock, but you'll see it's got the same stem as the adult leaves, more of a rhubarb shape, versus the round stem of the water lilies, fragrant and tuberous. See the difference? Pretty clear. So if you look at the details, very, very hard to mistake one from the other. Another easy way to tell the difference between the water lilies, again the white ones, the white flowers, versus the Spatterdock, the yellow ones. This right here is a spent flower of the Spatterdock, is the root. I showed you the root of the fragrant water lily and told you about the root of the, whoops, losing my paddle here, hold on a second. Alright, so I showed you the root of the fragrant water lily, and you can see that the Spatterdock root here is completely different. They're huge, scaly, they look like some kind of snake. And the spatterdock grows directly out of the ends of those roots. So again, if you dig up the roots, you can't mistake the roots between this and the other one. Okay, so there you have it. Just a short little video on the differences between the fragrant water lily and the tuberous water lily and the spatterdock, and some of the uses of both the fragrant and tuberous water lilies, where you can find them growing and whatnot. So if you're out and about on the waterways and you do find a large cluster of these, you might want to try harvesting some and see what they taste like. You might be surprised. Alright, until next time, this is White Wolf here at Element Mountain in Vermont. Please visit our website, elementmountain.com. Lots of stuff on there, always changing, always updating with new material. Come up here to Vermont, or down to Vermont, or over to Vermont, no matter where you are, for some high quality classes and workshops as well. Woolam Allison, be well and happy.